9:30 a.m. Shabbat morning services follow Stolen Moments, usually at around 10:30 a.m. Our address is 540 Northwest University, across from Met Stadium, and we are in Suite 102. Again, that's 540 Northwest University, Suite 102. Please join us for Friday nights at 7:30 p.m. or Shabbat morning starting at 9:30 a.m. for Stolen Moments. Congregation Eitz Chayim. Hi, this is Rabbi Shafir Lobb, and I'm inviting you to our monthly plant sale, this time at the Temple at 540 Northwest University Boulevard, Suite 102. It is on June 27th and June 28th, on Sunday from 1 to 5 and Monday from 11 to 3. Please join us and find some beautiful plants that our members have grown lovingly just for you to give to a new home, yours, a place to enjoy it.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
It's 11:07 at WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast, and you're on Ask a Rabbi.
And this is Rabbi Shafir Lobb of Congregation Eitz Chayim, your Jewish home on the Treasure Coast. And it is another beautiful Friday, although admittedly a little bit muggy out there. And
much needed rain, though.
Much needed rain, and it's been wonderful for the plants we've been growing. They're just going. But then you have to throw off the extra water, otherwise you get...
Yeah, and we've seen a little of that last 2 days. Yeah, there's
been a little bit of extra water floating around. But I am pleased so far that my new arrangement of the plants does not seem to be terribly bothered by winds. So
there you go.
Yep.
Good stuff.
Good stuff, yeah. And it is, you folks have noticed and has been mentioned here, it is mango season, and I fell in love with mangoes last year during the shutdown because my tree gave me such abundance. Now, those are not mine. Those were traded for some of mine. I understand, a Mexican, somebody said. I'm not sure. We call them red mangoes. So
red mangoes.
Well, because
how can they be red? They're green.
I hear that. They get a tinge of red on them, and they're obviously the big ones. And they come in all different sizes. I was surprised to learn when I first started researching mangoes, and that was part of the whole thing that led into the plants earlier that we now do in the plant sale. But there are over 100 kinds of mangoes out there. There are hundreds of varieties of mangoes. And what they call honey mango at the stores is really a combination of a group of the small yellow mangoes.
Huh, okay.
So, yeah. And the one that I seem to have in my backyard, some folks are telling me, is called lemon chiffon or lemon meringue or something like that. It's got a little bit of a lemony smell to it. Even as you cut it and prepare it, you get the scent of the lemon, and very, very sweet.
The ones that you brought in a couple weeks back were just amazing.
Those are from my little lemon one.
Yeah, there you go.
Because we had such a dry winter, it does not have anywhere near as much fruit as it did last year, which was not as dry a winter.
There you go. I've got a protest. You're a dog person.
I am. I'm a dog and cat person.
You're a show dog person.
I used to be.
How in the world does a Pekingese win Best Show?
Okay. Best in Show it's a strange...
There were some beautiful dogs there.
There are a lot of beautiful dogs. And no, the Pekingese cannot move anything like a hound.
You can't see the eyes. You can't see the feet. You can't see anything. It looks like a dust mop.
It's even more fun to watch the handlers carrying them with the hair flowing all over. But,
yes.
Some of my best memories are people with very, very long flowing hair dogs in rain, trying to keep the coats looking gorgeous. Okay, so the idea of Best in Show is totally, in some ways, very different from all the rest of the dog show. So I showed Chinese cresteds and poodles, and let's say I'm showing the Chinese crested. The Chinese crested is going to be judged against the other Chinese cresteds for the things on the standard, the breed standard. Every breed is judged against its standard. And the idea is that the dog that wins is the one that best exemplifies the breed standard. And there's obviously, because it's a dog show, an element of showmanship in the dog. Is the dog acting like they enjoy it? Are they show-offs, but appropriately show-offs, right? I mean, I had one that was so happy to be in the show that he never quite stopped goofing off. And many a judge said to me, he's really having a good time, but this isn't about having a good time, it's about showing off. Okay, so there's this blend that they have to have of look at me, I'm the winner, and dogs do have that sense about them. Some of them, if they were humans, you'd probably want to line them up and shoot them, but
egomaniacal dogs?
Yes.
No.
Yes. Well, there's a reason why we used to have on our motorhome a sign, and we now have it on our fridge that says, this house is maintained for the comfort of the dogs and their staff.
Yes.
And my husband periodically will call, and I will call each other, well, staff, the cats need this or the dogs need that.
Sure.
And,
Well, we are.
Yeah, we are their staff.
Realistically, we are.
We are their staff. This morning it was meow for water and meow for food and bark for this and growl for that. We have vocal fur babies who tell us what they want.
Well, I had to ask you about that because I was in the state of shock.
So that's how the breeds get to their individual groups, and there's 7 groups in a dog show, right? So there's sporting, there's non-sporting, there's working, there's herding, there's toy. Yeah. Sporting, non-sporting, working,
hunting. I think
hounds.
Was part of that.
Yeah, hounds. Yeah. Hounds, non-sporting, and toys. There we go. Herding. Somewhere in that batch I mentioned everybody. And when you get to best in show, okay, so when you get to the groups, right, so you've got all of the toy breeds in the toy group. You've got all of the non-sporting and the non-sporting groups. Those are the 2 groups in which I competed. Same is true with the herding and the sporting and the hounds. And what you're doing there is you are looking at the X number of dogs that make it to the group that represent their breeds, and the judge there is judging each dog against its own breed standard. Okay, so in the case of the Pekingese, is that the best Pekingese, is its grade for being the best Pekingese better than the poodle's grade for being the best poodle? Better than the best Chihuahua's grade for being the best Chihuahua?
Well, we only saw one Pekingese, though.
I understand, but it got there by competing against all the other Pekingese.
Okay, I got you. Okay.
Right. And so at Westminster has a semi-controlled entry, only because they're so prestigious. And when I stopped showing, the year that I stopped showing, we actually did have an invite to Westminster that February. We stopped in fall. And at fall, we already had the invitation to Westminster, and he was the number 7 dog in the country at the time.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah, well, they said that it started with 1,000 dogs.
Yeah. And those are distributed among the hundreds of breeds that are recognized by the AKC. And
sorry to get you off on this tangent.
It's a dog thing. It's okay. So let's say there's 25 poodles, of which 13 are males and 12 are females, and bitches and dogs, folks, because it's a category. And so you'll have the best of the dogs. Well, at Westminster, it's only champions. So that's one thing already. So you're going to have those 25 dogs competing, and the judge is going to pick what he believes or she believes is the best poodle, the best representative of poodles at the show. And then that dog is going to go on to the group. And then the judge will say, okay, that poodle ranks a 97 in their mind toward the breed standard. The Pekingese, maybe a 98. Right? And so he's going to pick, or she's going to pick, the Pekingese over the poodle, not because the Pekingese is a better dog than the poodle, but the Pekingese is a better representative of Pekingese than the poodle is of poodles.
I got you. Okay.
So that's how that competition.
That makes perfect sense then.
Yeah, that's what Best in Show is. It is the dog that best exemplifies its breed standard of all of the 1,000 dogs. And you know, they're not bad dogs when they get to Westminster. They're just not bad dogs.
Interesting. That's really interesting. Now there's a whole circuit of shows from coast to coast, right?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and technology is being its moment here.
Uh-oh. Yep. Well,
yeah, you know, what can I say? Gotta love it. I love technology.
When it works.
Yeah, there is that little detail. Okay, so it claims that it's being shared, so we'll assume that it's doing its thing. All right. Yeah, I love technology when it works. So dog shows, yeah, that's one of the things out of my past. And, you know, flying is one of the things out of my past. I've got a crazy past.
See, now what you needed to do is be able to fly to those dog shows in your own plane.
You know, that would probably be the least safe flying. You should never be the pilot of a flight that has to get somewhere, because you're going to make the wrong decisions.
Ooh.
You're going to push. Okay?
That's, yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's not being a good pilot. So if I have to get to a show, there needs to be a different pilot making those decisions. That's just a safety.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see, you know, you got to be there a certain time. You might cut corners.
Yeah.
Or try to.
Or fly into weather that's a little bit marginal that you might not otherwise decide to do.
Yep, as we saw with Kobe Bryant.
You know, I have to tell you, we took a flight many years ago, and we were going into Denver, and Denver got whited out with one of the wonderful...
The normal storm.
The normal storm, yeah. And the pilot actually did something that very few commercial pilots will do. He did a missed approach. He did not land. He took off, and he landed, I want to say Fort Collins or somewhere not far from Denver, but in another airport where, oddly enough, it was bright sunshine.
Yeah, it might have been Fort Collins, either that or Colorado Springs.
Well, yeah, it was one of those. It was one of the satellites in and around
both of them.
Yep. Something big enough to have taken the commercial jet that we were in. I don't remember what kind of a commercial jet it was. It was, you know, something. I think something Boeing or whatever. Anyway. And I went up to the pilot afterward when he was walking around waiting for clearance to go back into Denver, and thanked him for having the courage and the wisdom to have done a go-around, to do a missed approach. That, you know, we recognized that he was gonna hear about it because of the cost. You know, that's not a cheap missed approach.
Well, having gone into a snowdrift with a football team once in Denver, I think that was a very smart move on his part.
I'm sure that he made the decision because he really didn't feel it was safe.
Yeah.
And, you know, I wanted him to know that at least one of the passengers understood that was a very good decision. And I can remember sitting back in the plane. As you start to get ready, you hear all the things going on to get the airplane ready to land, because, you know, you have to get the flaps in the right settings, you got to get the wheels down, you got to this, you got to that. There's a whole bunch of noises in the airplane as the hydraulics and the electrics do all their stuff, and the plane is getting ready to convert to a ground vehicle. And, you know, we're coming in, and we knew that we were due in Denver at X o'clock, and all of a sudden, you know, you hear the the turbines are kept spinning because you don't have time on a jet to respin the turbines. So what they do is they have them in kind of a free spin. They're not producing the normal power. But you can hear him putting the power back to the turbines and, in the end, this huge thing that wants to come down because he's now set it up to come down to the earth, and it lifts back off again. So we knew something was going on pretty quickly. So...
Wow. Was he ex-military, by the way?
A lot of them are.
Yeah.
A lot of them are, especially a few years back. And even now. It was always one of the consolations. Most of the pilots who go into the military want to fly the fighters because that's the hot, sexy thing to fly, and it's fun and it's fast. And
Top Gun.
Yeah, that sort of thing. And, having been in a fighter jet and the feeling of being strapped into one, it is a special feeling. It is a very special feeling. On the other hand, the folks that do the tankers and the cargos and the people planes get a lot of multi-engine experience, which is what the airlines are looking for.
Interesting, yeah. Well, I know all of our news helicopter pilots were ex-nom jockeys.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And there was one that Carol flew with him, I don't know, maybe 100 times between San Diego and L.A. And every time you get in the helicopter, every time he'd go through this safety presentation. And, it's like, well, if I die, or, this is what you need to do. And it's like you're just sitting there, sweat is billowing from your brow. Yeah.
You just want him to get the air conditioning on. But he has to give you that briefing if you're a passenger.
I know. But still, it's funny.
You want to talk about feeling funny about that. It wasn't for hire, so it wasn't quite as critical. But when we flew down to Florida when we lived in Ohio to take our mothers to Disney, we had this vacation planned.
Okay.
Bill and I were flying down and, park the airplane for a week at then Orlando. And it actually was the weekend or the week that Orlando moved from its old site to the new turn, and it was totally we flew into one and flew out of another. It was very different. It was a strange feeling because they'd changed terminals and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
But we flew down with the mothers, and we had to give them that briefing.
Oh boy.
Yeah. It's
and they're
safety,
freaked out.
Safety first. I don't think they paid any more attention than most people pay on the airline. You want to look nonchalant like you've been on an airline 15 million times. Read the dang, because there's slight differences from the way it's configured for everybody. And, really do figure out how to operate the door if you are one of the folks sitting by the door, because the wrong time to pick up and fumble for that instruction book is when you need to get it open. But
yeah. Well, and I noticed a little Southwest plane that we flew to St. Louis, I guess, from Orlando was different than any Boeing I'd been in. But you're right. You have to look at that emergency
They're slightly
sheet
different.
in front
There's
of
slight differences, and some of them are very significant, and they're
look
important.
for the exits.
Because each airline configures the seating a certain way, and it prioritizes this and that. And they've got some control on what the airplane looks like as long as they're ordering it new. Not quite so much control when they're buying somebody else's plane. But it is important. It's one of the things that I used to get a kick out of in the military. When you check out a car from the motor pool, or you're assigned a car from the motor pool, there's a full checklist to go through on that vehicle before you put the keys in the ignition. You're supposed to check all 4 tires, make sure the pressure is right. You check under the hood, make sure the oil and assorted other fluids are right, including the window washing fluid. It's on a checklist, and you certify that you did that checklist every time you started the car. Wow,
that's amazing. Yeah, it's it's something to see. And turning back to Tucson again, Davis Monthan had a lot of military mothballed, and you go up the road a little bit to Marana, and that's like a regular airline parking lot there with a lot of airplanes.
And then there's that other airport that's on the way toward Phoenix that just cuts off the road. You kind of see it off in the distance there.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Lots of stuff.
Marana, up going to Phoenix, I remember there was an air crash at the Marana airport. Mm-hmm. Now, this was, at the time, a Howard Hughes secret base, which we didn't know about.
Yeah.
But anyway, this plane that crashed had all this bizarre, sophisticated stuff on it. And a friend of mine from KTAR in Phoenix, the NBC station in Phoenix, actually shot inside the cockpit. Oh, my God. You thought the wrath of civilization came down because we aired his story. Mm-hmm. And, we're getting calls. Every 3-lettered federal agency in the world called our newsroom. Where did you get that? It was like, oh, my goodness. Oh, yeah.
Yes, how to get somebody's attention.
Yeah, real quick. Oh, boy. Yeah. But, yeah, it's
it wasn't out in Jane's yet,
That's it. You got that right. Yep.
It's amazing what Jane's has.
They do.
They have incredible amount of information on just about every aircraft. Yeah.
How about, did you hear about the cicadas on the White House press plane?
No, I did not hear about that.
That flew through the window, and they had to lift the plane back and get another airplane to fly the news media to wherever President Biden was going. Yeah. But cicadas.
Well, they're huge. Come on,
I understand, but come on.
It's a great source of protein for those who are so inclined.
Oh, God. Back to the mangoes. Oh.
Well, mangoes are also a superfood.
No, I know.
They've got lots and lots of vitamins and things that you need. And it's one of the reasons that I totally enjoy them.
So your plant sale.
Yes, we are having a plant sale on the 27th and 28th. It's 2 days. And yes, there are baby mango plants going to be at that sale. We've got that. We've got quite a few things. So many different coleus. So we've got purslane. We've got something called baby bunny belly wandering Jew, which is a really cute little wandering Jew. Most of us have some wandering Jew somewhere in the garden. And no, it's not offensive to call it wandering Jew. That's its name.
Baby bunny
belly.
Baby bunny belly.
And the reason for that is when you touch the leaves, all wandering Jew plants are a little bit fuzzy. They have hairs on them. But when you touch this one, it is so soft and fuzzy. And it feels really cool.
Huh.
I have petted my plants a few times.
Now, what colors are these guys?
They're a dark greenish color. They don't have the purple. There's a hint of purple in the green, but they're mostly green. Or at least mine are, I should say. Mine are, okay. I grow them, and there's a couple other people that grow plants. Matt and Jay, they grow them out in the sun, full sun, out on pallets in their backyard. And I don't know where Stacy grows hers. There's a couple other people that grow plants for us. Donna grows some. And different people have different conditions. So we see the same kind of plant looking different depending on where it's been raised.
That's interesting, yeah.
Now, most of mine are raised on in my patio, my Florida room.
Your Florida room, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, some people put screens up. I put plants up.
Hey, whatever works.
Yep.
Whatever works. And if they like the environment,
they're doing well in there. I've got some candelabra cactus in there. I've got some barrel cactuses. I've got some small cactus. I've got echeveria, all different kinds of things. Some house plants and some outdoor plants. A great big variety of pothos. We'll probably have a couple of Hawaiian pothos. Those are the ones that have those humongous variegated leaves that you see sometimes going up pine trees.
Okay, yes.
We've got babies of those.
Okay.
So
now, how tall will they grow?
They will grow all the way up a tall palm tree or a pine tree.
Okay, interesting.
Right. Anywhere where they can latch onto the stalk, and they're a climbing vine, so they'll go. I've got right now. I've got a mother pothos plant that I wasn't paying much attention to this past month, and it's got at least one leg on it that's as tall as I am.
Whoa!
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, dude, you've been busy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy smokes!
So my mother actually had pothos growing in our house. She had philodendron and pothos growing, and it was popular back in the day. She put little tiny nails in the wall, and the plant, the whole part of the wall
that's
was
your
the
wallpaper.
Plant. Yeah, it was. It was great.
That's really neat. Yeah.
It was fun because we had a parakeet at the time, and it used to sometimes sit.
Oh, I bet. You sure?
In there, it had a good time in there.
Yeah,
she used to yell at it periodically because it would knock it off the little nails. Taking flight, it wasn't always gentle. So yeah, some of the great memories. So anyway, back to Ask a Rabbi.
Yeah. Now back to the show.
We have definitely wandered in this show, and that's okay. I don't mind going wherever you or anybody else who wants to call in to 772-340-1590 might want to take us. And yes, so I guess let me incorporate what you were talking about by mentioning that I didn't become a rabbi right out of school. I did start rabbinical school right out of college, and life got in the way. My dad died, and I ended up, I tried to go into research, something else that fascinated me, and because that was another time when our economy tanked, I ended up in retail, and that's where I managed a flower shop, which is how I became a flight instructor, which is how I moved to Ohio and met my husband, became an engineer. I became an engineer because I had a gut sense that a couple of the things that were being said in the flight training book didn't make sense. And there was a way of trying to explain to non-engineers how lift is created on a wing. And it's Bernoulli's effect. It's the airflow that's moving. The reality is it's the airflow moving and the compression above and below the airfoil between the air that isn't affected by it and the air that is displaced. It's much tighter, and therefore the pressure is lower on top, and so the airplane rises because the pressure is higher underneath it. And that's how it generates lift. But that isn't how it was explained in the diagram in the flight training book. It had this little picture, and it said, this bit of these two molecules of air has to travel farther to go over the top of the wing, so it moves faster to meet back with the molecule at the end of and I'm like, they're not married, they're not going to necessarily get back together. Right? And I couldn't see any force that could cause them to have to get back together on the other side, because I've seen streams do whatever they want to do. And so that was one of the things that I really wanted to understand better, was how lift was created so I could be a better pilot. And by the time I finished taking all the courses that taught me the aerodynamics and the other stuff, my advisor looked at me and said, based on your other degree that you've got and what you're taking here, you need 2 more credits and you've got your engineering degree.
Wow.
So I went ahead and enrolled and got my mechanical engineering degree from the University of Akron way back when. And with that, Goodyear was part of the recruiting that happened then.
Oh, I'll bet.
And my husband and I had this very good family discussion that a flight instructor works all the hours that an engineer doesn't. And so, I would sit there at the airport while he was at work, waiting for the times when my students would come, and then he would sit at the airport waiting for me to finish working, and we'd crawl home late at night, go to bed, and get up in the next morning and do it over again. And that just wasn't a whole lot of fun. It really wasn't. And it was also the time when people were getting a little bit crazy, and they were suing. It was when Thurman Munson took the citation into Akron Canton.
Awful. Yeah.
Or I should say, just took it into the ground before Akron Canton.
Yep.
And the heirs, the family, actually sued the primary flight instructor. Yeah.
Why?
For a lack of teaching him proper judgment and stuff like that. And I mean, it was one of those cases where they sued everybody who had any connection with anything. If you made the screw that went into the engine, then you were probably on the list.
Yeah.
And it was that kind of a litigious, not the kind that our Ask a Lawyer would want to be part of, but they asked a lot of lawyers, and a lot of lawyers wanted a piece of the pot, I guess. I don't know. But I looked at Bill, and I very candidly said, if it's not even that these suits are going to win, it's that it's going to tie you up
years
for a long period of time. It's just going to wreak havoc. And I said, that's not it's one thing to do that with my own assets and my own time and my own students. It's a totally different thing to do it with his assets, because Ohio is a community property state. And so everything he brought into the marriage was subject to those kind of crazy suits. And so we had this long discussion, and I decided to hang up the wings and start flying a desk. And took a job at Goodyear. So that was how I went from being a flight instructor to being a tire engineer. It's the short version of the story.
Okay. I've got to ask you, during those times, were you unique in your staff?
Being female at Goodyear?
I wasn't going to say that. Yeah.
Let's say I was definitely in the minority. And yeah.
How many women were there when you were
there? Were a handful.
Yeah.
There were a small handful.
I bet it had to be small.
While I was at Goodyear, we had the very first engineering manager who was female, right before I left Goodyear. So there was definitely a glass ceiling there. And
how many years did that ceiling take?
Probably about 15.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow.
It took a while. And on the other hand, it was great for being female for getting hired. I was offered all kinds of positions, only some of them in Akron or Canton. I was offered a job at Timken. I was offered, because there weren't too many female engineers graduating in my class either.
Oh, I'll bet.
I think I was one of 2 or 3 in my entire graduating class at Akron. So, yeah, it was not a big time for females. And when I went to work at Goodyear, I wore a 3-piece suit. I wore a vest. In the beginning, I actually wore pants, a vest, and a jacket. And I graduated to a skirt and a vest and a jacket.
So how much was there initial pushback when you wanted to wear the skirt?
Each of the stages was interesting, and I can remember making the decision each of the different times. Because actually, when my mother made my suits. She was a wonderful seamstress. And she always made me a skirt and pants to go with the vest and jacket. So it was not a big deal to make the change. I would wear the skirt in different scenarios without the vest, or with it for other things than work. And but when I worked down in the factory, when I took a tech service position, then I wore jeans. Because you're climbing over tire machines.
Yeah, I was going to say that's.
Yeah, it's
a little different down there. Yeah.
When you're trying to see why is this piece hanging up here in the machine, you kind of have to go look at it. So, yeah, there were some interesting times there, And I learned a lot in all of the different positions in Goodyear. It's surprising what goes into a tire. You might not realize it. It's not just a bunch of rubber in a circle.
See, that's what I would assume.
Yeah. No, there's like 29 or 30 components in a tire. Different pieces that get put together. Different bits of rubber in the shoulder, different bits of rubber in the tread part of the tire. You know, it's all rubber, but it's different compounds. Different stuff down in the bead, and there's stuff that insulates where the ply comes up around the bead. Even radial tires is radial ply tires as opposed to bias ply tires.
Okay.
Right? So bias plies have multiple layers going across each other, and the radials, they're straight line across the tire.
Sure.
And you need things in and around the beads. The beads are wires, and they're held together by rubber. A lot of those things are assembled and produced off the main tire machine and brought to the tire machine. So the beads are prepared and brought to the machine. The tread is fed onto the tire. It's one of the last things that happens. And then the tire is taken to the press and cooked, basically, cured. It's a fascinating process.
Wow, that's interesting.
And you've got chemical engineers, you've got mechanical engineers, all working together trying to make the tire do the things you want. You want it to be quiet. It's tread patterns and traction and wear and sound and all different kinds of things. And John, thank you for calling on line 1. I appreciate it. What's your question, sir?
Speaking of tires, I was hoping we could drive back to the Old Testament and segue.
Okay.
Something you had just said about a glass ceiling. And I was thinking, the Old Testament has a lot of mentioning of how women should behave. And I know in your commercials that I hear on this wonderful station, you mentioned about the Reform. Is that where the Reform tradition comes in, where they try to rectify those passages from the old Bible and what women should be doing today?
Well, I'm trying to figure out what you're saying that Scripture says women should do.
Because weren't women always in a submissive role, like they always mentioned, I'm a Christian, so they always mentioned that the women weren't afraid to go when Jesus was crucified because the men probably would have been executed with him. But for some reason, I've read where Romans used to execute women also, but they weren't they always held in a lesser standard than men as far as leadership roles? I mean, women could not be rabbis.
Okay, you've got a whole bunch of stuff from different periods kind of thrown into the stew, John. Let me see if I can unpack some of it. You said you want to go back to what you called Old Testament, which is usually how Jewish scriptures are referred to, and there are women generals, and there are all kinds of different roles for men and women. Right, Deborah is a judge, and Barak is her general. And
what period are we at?
That's the period of Judges, so that would have been the period before King Saul or King David. Saul is the first king, and Saul means Shaul, requested. He was asked. The people of Israel wanted a king because they didn't like the system of having appointed judges that would call up armies. They wanted a standing army. And you kind of need somebody to run the standing army, which is the job of the king. And so they request, and the prophet of the time, Samuel, anoints Saul to be the king. And he actually falls out of favor for a number of reasons. And David means beloved. So, he's a popular king. He's fighting. He fights very interestingly, and he obviously looks a little bit different. And so you have the story of Ruth to explain how it is that somebody could be Jewish and look like a Moabite. All right. And there's a couple of interesting things about David and Saul. We know they're both very tall. It says of Saul that he stood head and shoulders above everybody else. And when there's a story between Saul and David, the fighting of Goliath, right, the giant, however big a giant was, Saul gives David his armor to wear. Now, if you're a 6'3" person which I would consider tall. That's the height of my husband. I liken myself to the typical height of everyday Jews, or Judeans. They weren't called Jews then, they were called Judeans, or Benjamites, or whatever tribe you were from that was part of the connection of the group, the 12 tribes. And Saul's a Benjamite, and he offers David his armor. You're not going to offer that to a 5'0" to put on because it wouldn't fit. And when he offers it to David, David rejects it not because it doesn't fit, but because he says, I'm not used to the restrictions of armor. I'm not accustomed to moving in these kinds of clothes. Right? So he it's like today, some folks shun some of the protective garb that police wear, because that's why the police all look so big and husky and burly. It's because they're putting on protective gear to hopefully protect them against a handgun. It's not going to protect them against a rifle, but it'll protect against a handgun. But it restricts your movement at the same time, and it's heavy. And so David rejects it. So we know that David also must be head and shoulders above everybody else, which, height is very often an important piece in people's visual cueing. Okay, so there are, there's nothing in that group. The Romans, yes, the Romans definitely do not treat women well. That's a very Roman concept. And in, Aristotle and Socrates, Aristotle especially, really demeans women. Says, they have smaller brains, they're not as smart, da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, you really want to get into some sexism. And Aristotle, of course, right, teaches Alexander the Great, who then goes throughout the what becomes the Roman Empire. And he does it earlier, he does it as the Greeks, but he conquers all the way down to Alexandria, all the way down into Africa. And so he covers a big part of that world, spreading those Roman ideas. And so by the time Rome comes in, and Rome is at the back door. Right? First you have the Greeks coming through with theirs, and then they get pushed back, not because they were weak, but because they were fighting Rome in Europe. That's the story of Hanukkah, is the downfall of the Greco-Assyrian empires. But and of course Scripture attributes that to God doing it, but historians will tell you things were just too hot for the Greeks back home, and they couldn't maintain what they were doing because of the stuff going on in Europe. And with that, Rome comes up and brings its ideas, which are built on the Greek ideas, especially on the eastern part of the Roman Empire, because all of the soldiers in Judea and in Egypt and throughout Arabia are going to be very influenced by Aristotle through Alexander the Great. So those ideas are going to be very prevalent anywhere that Alexander had his influence. And it's part
were women allowed to be in the temple?
They were allowed in the courts with whoever else was there. In fact, this is one of the things that I love how people do what we call cherry picking. They'll pick the piece of the rules and the regulations that they want.
I'm a novice. Don't misunderstand.
Yeah,
I
understand
me. I'm reading a chronological Bible, so I'm just, I'm not an expert. I don't pretend to be, and I'm not trying to get
I understand.
But I did read something today where the first woman ruler that I can see, when after the kingdom had divided, Judah had a ruler, Athallah. Am I saying her name right?
I have
Athallah rules in Judah, it says. And that's the first one where I can see.
I'm not even sure what you're talking about.
Okay, this is in 2 Kings, chapter 11. And it mentions when Athallah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to destroy the whole royal family. And she assumed the power of Judah. And that's the first time I ever saw a woman leader in either Kings or Chronicles. So I was just curious. She may have been the first ruler.
No, Deborah certainly precedes her, and even Miriam, Aaron, and Moses are the ones who lead even through the wandering. Right? Miriam is a prophetess. People miss that very often.
I've never even heard her mentioned.
Her and her timbrel. She does an awful lot. She finds the water for everybody. And interestingly, she's not there in this week's story. And Moses is beating on the rock to get water out because Miriam knew how to find it much more gently.
Well, it's a guy thing.
Well,
with
women
Moses,
are more
that's
gentle.
all.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
No, we both are. I think.
Women have always been. This is a myth about women not having power. Women have always had power. They've always been the stronger sex because they know how to do things, as you just illustrated, in a more creative way, and they can always influence a man. I mean, any presidential wife has a lot of power. Any marriage a woman has a lot of power. So going back to Cleopatra and before, I mean, women have.
Women have had power. It varies. There are certainly times when it's difficult for a woman if she's actively, birthing a child into the world. And a lot of women died in childbirth back then as well. So there's a lot of stuff, and mothers tend to take very good care of their babies, etc. But if you want to hear of a powerful, powerful woman, there's a couple of wonderful stories in scriptures. There's the story of Bathsheba, who basically runs David's household. Her son, not his firstborn, by far. And it's her secondborn. The story of the baby dying in the Book of Kings is all about knowing that the child that becomes king is at least her secondborn because the love child died. Wait
a minute. Back then,
you could do Peyton Place out of that part of scriptures. You really could, right?
Well, the Bible has it all. I mean, the Bible has incest, sex, rock and roll. I mean, it's just amazing how much murder is going on. I mean,
there's all kinds of stuff.
I'm going through Kings and Chronicles, and everyone's killing each other off, and I'm thinking, well,
it was not a peaceful
really
time.
Plan.
It was not a peaceful time, and that's part of why people wanted kings. It was to keep those militaries going. So, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for answering that. I appreciate your time.
Oh, my pleasure.
All right, let's get back to this Moses thing.
What about Moses? Moses, Miriam, and Aaron?
Miriam, yeah.
Yeah. She picks up the timbrel when everybody is kind of shell-shocked after they get through. And she has the women sing and dance. Breaks up the shock of seeing. Right, and that's an interesting piece. There are several pieces of that. Most people think that Moses splits the water with his rod. And if you read scriptures a little bit carefully, you'll read that the east wind, imagine that.
Hurricane what?
Yeah, exactly. The east wind parts the sea and dries the land because it blows all night. Sound like Port St. Lucie? Yeah.
Yeah, been there, done that.
Right, so anybody who's lived through a hurricane or a tsunami, for that matter, could probably understand big references to what's going on in the parting of the seas stories. It sounds a little bit like a tsunami.
Well, it sounded more like a tsunami than a hurricane.
Yeah, well, it like maybe a combination of two.
Could be, yeah.
Right, or a blending of two stories.
No.
Yeah, something like that.
Interpretation?
But anyway. And then the other part that people don't pay attention to is when the Israelites get to the far side of the marsh Reed Sea, not the Red Sea, folks, the Reed Sea. Somebody dropped an E for the King James version. It's Yam Suf, which is the Reed Sea. It's a marsh like we have here in Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Reed Sea, not Red Sea.
Yeah.
Thank you, King James.
Yeah. Because Yam Adom is very different from Yam Suf. Reed and Red are close in English, but they're not close in Hebrew. And that's why it's important to know some of the other things going on And they're not. I don't remember enough of my Greek to remember if they're similar in Greek or not.
Wow.
Yeah, it's the Reed Sea whose water gets parted. Probably, kind of like the Suez Canal that's had its other problems lately. But I'm sure there are plenty of Reed Seas in that area, in that marshland. It has to be. They've got crocodiles.
And super tankers stuck on them.
I was thinking about that too. But anyway, when the Israelites cross, and the Israelites are not Israelis. Israelis are modern citizens of the state of Israel. Israelites are the folks in the Bible who are part of the amalgam of Israel. Israelis and Israelites are different. Israelites are historical. They don't exist anymore.
Oh.
Okay, because that amalgam under the kings and under the prophets doesn't exist anymore. The state of Israel has a Knesset, it has a parliament, it has its own stuff. It's a different structure. It's a different country than ancient Israel or ancient Judea or any of those other areas were or are. And anyway, so when Israelites are on the far side of the Reed Sea, they look back and they see Egypt dead on the shore. Not the Egyptians, but Egypt. And so what that's most likely is, it's either Pharaoh, who probably didn't lead the chariots himself, but probably his number one son, his heir apparent, is probably leading the chariots. And that's who they see dead. It's not the Egyptians. It doesn't say the Egyptians. Hebrew is very clear between Egypt and Egyptians. Egypt is the ruler of the country. Right? And so what's going to happen if Egypt itself is, the ruler of Egypt is dead, or the heir apparent is dead? It's going to cause an upheaval back in Egypt. And that's what has them kind of shell-shocked, because they realize that there isn't going to be a big force coming after them because Egypt's going to be busy reorganizing. So, yeah. A little bit of careful reading, but again, being aware back into the original text. I'll end with a cute story. When I was doing the Children of Abraham Journey Together conference at Lakeside, Ohio, it's a Chautauqua society, and they had one of those Bible bookstore, Cokesbury I think it is, in the little village at Lakeside, and a woman walked in there and said, "I'd like to buy the Bible in its original language." And the clerk goes back and gets a Hebrew Jewish scriptures and a Greek New Testament for her, and she looks at it, she says, "What's that?" And the woman said, "Well, you wanted scriptures in
the original.
You wanted the original language," which she happened to have. And she said, No, I mean the King James. It's like, that's such a bad translation, folks. Yeah, it's much, much later. You want to talk about an agenda in a translation?
No.
No. Yeah. Just because we want to separate from Rome, not that there were any political agendas in there. But, and the question becomes, how and what does that change in our understanding when you do that translation? So that's just one of the questions we could ask next week on Ask a Rabbi. So thanks again to John. Thank you for listening. Thank you for asking a great question. When you do scriptural studies, it's important to know what's when. And you could learn some more about that next week right here back on Ask a Rabbi at 11:05 on WPSL Digital 1590. This is Rabbi Shafir Lobb. It's been a great session of Ask a Rabbi. Thank you for making it great, everyone.
And thank you for the mangoes.
Oh, absolutely.
Cool.
Anytime.
Ask a Rabbi right here on WPSL Port St. Lucie, Talk of the Treasure Coast, webcaster to the world.